Dracula by Bram Stoker. Chapter 11. 12th of September. Lucy Westenra's Diary. Oh, how good they all are to me! I quite love that dear Dr. Van Helsing. I wonder why he was so anxious about these flowers. He positively frightened me, he was so fierce. And yet he must have been right, for I feel comfort from them already. Somehow I do not dread being alone tonight, and I can go to sleep without fear. I shall not mind any flapping outside the window. Oh, the terrible struggle that I have had against sleep so often of late, the pain of the sleepiness, or the pain of the fear of sleep, which such unknown horrors as it has for me. How blessed are some people whose lives have no fears, no dreads, to whom sleep is a blessing that comes nightly, and brings nothing but sweet dreams. Well, here I am tonight, hoping for sleep, and lying like Ophelia in the play, with virgin krantz and maiden stumens. I never liked garlic before, but tonight is delightful. There is peace in its smell. I feel sleep coming already. Good night, everybody. Dr. Seward's Diary. 13th of September. Called to the Berkeley and found Van Helsing as usual up to time. The carriage ordered from the hotel was waiting. The professor took his bag, which he always brings with him now. Let all be put down exactly. Van Helsing and I arrived at Hillingham at 8 o'clock. It was a lovely morning. The bright sunshine and all the fresh feeling of early autumn seemed like the completion of nature's annual work. The leaves were turning to all kinds of beautiful colours, but had not yet begun to drop from the trees. When we entered, we met Mrs. Westenra coming out of the morning room. She is always an early riser. She greeted us warmly, and said, "You will be glad to know that Lucy is better. The dear child is still asleep. I looked into her room and saw her, but did not go in, lest I should disturb her." The professor smiled, and I looked quite jubilant. He rubbed his hands together and said, "Aha! I thought I had diagnosed the case. My treatment is working." To which she answered, "You must not take all the credit to yourself. Doctor, Lucy's state this morning is due in part to me." "How do you mean, ma'am?" asked the professor. "Well, I was anxious about the dear child in the night, and went into her room. She was sleeping soundly, so that even my coming did not wake her, but the room was awfully stuffy. There was some sort of those terrible strong-smelling flowers about everywhere, and she had actually a bunch of them around her neck. I feared that the heavy odour would be too much for the dear child, in her weak state, so I took all of them away and opened a bit of the window to let in a little fresh air. You'll be pleased with her, I'm sure." She moved off into the boudoir where she usually breakfasted early, and she had spoken. I watched the professor's face and saw it turn ashen grey. He had been able to retain his self-command whilst the poor lady was present, for he knew her state and how mischievous a shock would be. He actually smiled at her as he held open the door for her to pass into her room. But the instant she had disappeared, he pulled me suddenly and forcibly into the dining room and closed the door. Then, for the first time in my life, I saw Van Helsing break down. He raised his hands over his head in a sort of mute despair, then beat his palms together in a helpless way. Finally he sat down on a chair, and putting his hands before his face, began to sob with loud, dry sobs that seemed to come from the very racking of his heart. Then he raised his arms again, and though appalling to the whole universe, "God! God! God!" he said, "what have we done? What has this poor thing done, that we are so sore beset? Is there fate amongst us still, sent down from the pagan world of old, that such things must be, and in such a way? This poor mother, all unknowing, and for all the best she think, does such a thing to lose her daughter body and soul. We must not tell her, we must not even warn her, or she die, and then both die. Oh, how we are beset! How are all the powers of the devils against us?" Suddenly he jumped to his feet. "Come," he said, "come, we must see and act. Devils or no devils, or all the devils at once, it matters not, we fight him all the same." He went to the hall door for his bag, and together we went up to Lucy's room. Once again I drew up the blind, whilst Van Helsing went towards the bed. This time he did not start as he looked on the poor face with the same awful waxen pallor as before. He wore a look of stern sadness and infinite pity. As I expected, he murmured, with that hissing inspiration of his which I meant so much. Without a word, he went and locked the door, and then began to set out the little table, the instruments for yet another operation of transfusion of blood. I had long ago recognized the necessity, and begun to take off my coat, but he stopped me with a warning hand. "No," he said. "Today you must operate. I shall provide. You are weakened already." As he spoke, he took off his coat and rolled up his shirt sleeve. Again the operation, again the narcotic, again some return of colour to the ashy cheeks, and the regular breathing of healthy sleep. This time I watched whilst Van Helsing recruited himself and rested. Presently he took an opportunity of telling Mrs. Westenra that she must not remove anything from Lucy's room without consulting him, that the flowers were of medicinal value, and that the breathing of their odour was part of the system of cure. Then he took over the care of the case himself, saying that he would watch this night and the next, and would send me word when to come. After another hour Lucy waked from her sleep, fresh and bright, and seemed not much the worse for her terrible ordeal. What does it all mean? I am beginning to wonder if my long habit of life amongst the insane is beginning to tell upon my own brain. Lucy Westenra's Diary, 17th of September. 4 days and nights of peace. I am getting so strong again that I hardly know myself. It is as if I had passed through some long nightmare, and had just awakened to see the beautiful sunshine and feel the fresh air of the morning around me. I have a dim half-remembrance of long, anxious times of waiting and fearing, darkness in which there is not even the pain of hope to make present distress more poignant, and then long spells of oblivion, and the rising back of life as a diver coming up through a great press of water. Since, however, Dr. Van Helsing has been with me, all this bad dreaming seems to have passed away. The noises that used to frighten me out of my wits, the flapping against the windows, the distant voices which seemed so close to me, the harsh sounds that came from I know not where, and commanded me to do I know not what, have all ceased. I go to bed now without any fear of sleep. I do not even try to keep awake. I have grown quite fond of the garlic, and the boxful arrives for me every day from Haarlem. Tonight Dr. Van Helsing is going away, as he has been for a day in Amsterdam. But I need not be watched. I am well enough to be alone. Thank God for Mother's sake, and dear Arthur's, and for all our friends who have been so kind. I shall not even feel the change, for last night Dr. Van Helsing slept in his chair a lot of the time. I found him asleep twice when I awoke, but I did not fear to go to sleep again, although the boughs or bats or something flapped almost angrily against the window panes. The Pall Mall Gazette, 18th of September. The escaped wolf. Perilous adventure of our interviewer. Interviewed with the keeper in the Zoological Gardens. After many inquiries and almost as many refusals, and perpetually using the words Pall Mall Gazette as a sort of talisman, I managed to find the keeper of the section of the Zoological Gardens in which the wolf department is included. Thomas Bilder lives in one of the cottages in the enclosure behind the elephant house, and was just sitting down to his tea when I found him. Thomas and his wife are hospitable folk, elderly and without children, and if the specimen I enjoyed of their hospitality be of the average kind, their lives must be pretty comfortable. The keeper would not enter on what he called business until the supper was over, and we were all satisfied. Then, when the table was cleared and he lit his pipe, he said, "Now, sir, you can go on and ask what you want. You'll excuse me refusin' to talk of professional subjects afore meals. I've given the wolves and all the jackals and the hyenas in all our section their tea afore I begins to ask them questions." "How do you mean, ask them questions?" I queried, wishing to get him into a talkative murmur. "Eating of them all over the head with a pole is one way, scratching of their ears is another, and when gents is as flush wants a bit of show-off for their gals, I don't so much mind the fuss, the eating with a pole after I chucks it their dinner, but I waits till they've had the sherry and coffee, so to speak, afore I tries on with the ear scratching. Mind you," he adds philosophically, "there's a deal of the same nature in us as them animals. Here's you a-coming and asking of me questions about my business, and that grumpy like that only for your bloomin' half-quid. I'd seen you blowed fuss before I'd answer. Not even when you asked me sarcastic like if you'd like to ask the superintendent if you might ask me questions. Without offence, did I tell you to go to hell?" "You did." And when you said you'd report for me using of obscene language, that was hitting me over the head, but the half-quid made that all right. I weren't going to fight, so I waited for the food, and took my owl as all the wolves, and lions and tigers does. But Lord love your heart, now that old Ooman has stuck a chunk of her tea cake in me, and rinsed me out with her bloomin' old teapot, and I've lit up, you may scratch me ears for all you're worth, and don't even get a growl out of me. Drive along with your questions, I know what you're coming at, and you're escaped wolf.